Greetings, voice enthusiasts. I'm John Nicholas Peters, the vocal technician. I wanted to discuss the subject of breath support and vibrato. Breath support and vibrato are one and the same, inextricably linked together, as it relates to any style of singing that involves the use of vibrato. There is a misconception that vibrato is the foundation of tone, and it's not. Vibrato is a wave form on a tone. There are fundamentally two ways to produce a wave form on a tone. One is a volume fluctuation. You start out with what I call the fundamental tone, which is just a straight tone. And then for a volume fluctuation, after establishing that fundamental tone, you make it slightly louder for a split second, return to your starting point, and repeat. Ah. That is a volume fluctuation on a tone. That is the correct way to produce a correctly supported vocal vibrato. Now, the other way to produce a waveform on a tone is a pitch fluctuation. The note, the pitch, then the pitch below it, return to your starting pitch and repeat. Ah, some people confuse that with vibrato. That's actually called a wobble, and that's a vocal flaw. You don't want there to be an audible pitch fluctuation within the waveform. The important part of this is the stabilized and well-supported fundamental tone, which is the basis. That's the foundation of your waveform, of your correctly produced vocal vibrato. And then you have the note and more, the note and more. So fundamentally, vocal vibrato needs to be an enhancement of the fundamental tone. So you have the fundamental tone, fully stabilized, well supported, and more. Always the note and more, the note and more. Now, as this relates to the subject of breath support, how do we achieve this? There are three diaphragms which are involved in the process of breath support and vibrato. The first diaphragm is the vocal cords coming together. They form a flexible diaphragm. The second diaphragm is the thoracic diaphragm or the respiratory diaphragm, which you breathe with. It's like a dome-shaped muscle at the bottom of your rib cage. The third diaphragm is the pelvic perineal diaphragm, which is all the way at the bottom of your pelvis. Think of it like a little trampoline at the bottom of your pelvis. And no, I'm not speaking Greek. If you're Greek, you'll get the joke. So some call it the pelvic floor. And it is the interaction of these three diaphragms which creates breath support and vibrato. Now, you got your thoracic diaphragm here. The thoracic diaphragm is only capable of pushing down. It cannot push back up. To create a waveform has to have two sides. You can't have one side without the other side. In order to produce a waveform, the thoracic diaphragm needs to connect with the pelvic perineal diaphragm or the pelvic floor. Now, between here and here are all of your internal organs. Think of them like as a stack of pillows. They're soft and squishy. In order for the thoracic diaphragm to connect with the pelvic perineal diaphragm as the beginning of breath support, to establish what I call your anchor, you need to create a downward pressure using the thoracic diaphragm. Let's say I have, I'm holding a stack of pillows between my hands here. If I do this with this hand, there is going to be almost no effect down here. But if I compress those pillows together and I do this, now any movement from this hand will be immediately responded to with this hand. Consequently, in order for the thoracic diaphragm to fully connect and communicate with the pelvic perineal diaphragm, you need to produce this downward pressure using the thoracic diaphragm. Essentially, what you want to do is what is called pelvic laryngeal fusion, so that the seat of breath support, which is the pelvic perineal diaphragm, can communicate with the vocal cords or with the larynx. So you produce this downward pressure, also ribs out. Okay, so now my thoracic diaphragm has connected with the pelvic perineal diaphragm. That is the start. That is the foundation. So now I got a nicely stabilized fundamental tone. Now, with a slight thrust, downward thrust from the thoracic diaphragm, you get a rebound off of the pelvic perineal diaphragm. So you get a thrust and rebound, thrust and rebound. If you look inside the body, it's kind of like, think of it kind of like a worm-like effect. And then you will get a result with the vocal cords. So fully stabilized fundamental tone. Now I got what I call that my anchor, so that this diaphragm is fully communicating with this one. Downward anchor. Fully stabilized fundamental tone, fully supported fundamental tone. And then you add to that only the note and more, the note and more. Now, another important thing is when you create that downward pressure using the thoracic diaphragm, you don't want this to happen. You don't want your stomach to stick out, because if it does, you're going to get a pressure loss at the halfway point. Okay? Like my teacher in grad school used to say, oh yeah, push your stomach out for high notes. Anyway, so what you want to do is you need to have a gentle draw in, navel to spine. It's the same as if you've ever taken a Pilates class. I recommend Pilates to singers. It's very good to establish core strength. A gentle draw in, navel to spine, to avoid this from happening when you create the downward pressure from the thoracic diaphragm. Gentle draw in, be careful. You don't want it, you don't want rigid, like you're doing sit-ups or something. Strength and flexibility are what you want, because if you have a rigidity in the abdominal area, in many cases, nothing's going to move inside that. You're not going to have that nice thrust and rebound. So gentle draw in, navel to spine, simultaneously with establishing the downward support. Thoracic diaphragm connects with the pelvic perineal diaphragm. Think of the center of your body being like a piston. So you breathe straight down, ribs out. Now I got my stability established, the foundation of breath support, and now I'm going to add to it. Right? That's the foundation of breath support. Now, one of the ways of achieving this is what I call internalized breathing. Observe the great singers. This is something you're going to hear from me a lot. Many of the fundamental questions about vocal technique can be answered simply by observing the great singers. Notice I didn't say listening to the great singers. There's a difference between listening and observing. If you're listening, oh, isn't it beautiful? Oh, does it sound great? You're getting sort of an overall impression of what the voice is. What you want to do is observe past the voice to see what do the vast majority of great singers do. What do they all have in common? What do they all do? What do they all not do? And one of the fundamental attributes of great singers that you will notice, whether they're opera singers or pop singers, is that when they breathe between phrases, it's an unfortunate fact, you got to have air in the lungs to sing with. When they take in air, you don't see a lot of expansion of the body. You don't see a lot of huffing and puffing and expansion. In many cases, you can't see any movement. You'll see a great singer, they're performing, whether it's an opera singer or a pop singer, they take a breath and you don't see any movement. And yet you know the air's got to be going in somewhere. In order to achieve this, you have to exact the muscular engagement which I just described. So let me show you. Look, I'm establishing my fundamental support. Now I'm going to breathe, and when I exhale, I'm going to maintain that downward and outward pressure using the thoracic diaphragm, keeping the ribs out. So look down here. So you can hear that I'm moving a lot of air, but you're not seeing a lot of expansion or contraction down here. This is the fundamental, most important way to breathe in order to sing, what I call internalized breathing. And in future videos, I'll give some exercises so that you can achieve this. So in a nutshell, this is how breath support and vibrato work. Remember, vibrato is not the foundation of tone. The fundamental tone is the foundation of tone. You have a straight tone, and then the note and more, the note and more, the note and more. You always want to have the note and more, never the note and less. Now, one of the reasons that this can be a challenge to get an idea of how all of this works is that there are variations on a theme. You'll hear some singers that have a smoother vibrato. That's because they have a little bit more of a pitch fluctuation within the waveform. That's okay as long as it's not audible, just a mild, slight pitch fluctuation within the waveform. That's what I call a throat cushion, because that pitch fluctuation is cushioning the pulse from the support system. Okay, so it's kind of smoothing out that waveform and making it just a little more pleasant to listen to. But then you'll hear other singers who they have almost no throat cushion, and they're producing a really solidly supported pulse from the support system. You hear a lot of opera singers that do that. That's because opera singers have to project over a full orchestra without the aid of a microphone. Pop singers don't, so the vibrato can be smoother because they're always singing right into a microphone. So that's why this can be kind of confusing. But fundamentally, the really important thing is that there is never an audible pitch fluctuation within the waveform. Because if you get that, that's a wobble, or even if it's just a slight pitch fluctuation within the waveform, that can get worse as years go by. It starts out as something that's almost inaudible. Then as the years go by and the singer is singing and singing and singing and singing, that becomes worse and worse and worse, to the point where, you hear these aging opera singers and they have a big wobble within the waveform. So remember, there are variations on a theme. Some singers have a stronger pulse, which sounds kind of bumpy. Other singers have a smoother waveform, but they all sound good. And the important thing is that it be appropriate to the style of singing that you want to do. So that's the big picture regarding breath support and vibrato. In future videos, I will explain a few exercises, as I said before. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe to my YouTube channel. And you can also find me on my webpage, vocaltechnician.com. And my Facebook page is Facebook, The Vocal Technician, basically. Thank you, and I'll see you soon.